Welcome everyone to Network Analysis Made Simple. And this tutorial is about modeling data as graphs and networks and like analyzing that data and trying to get insights from that data. And also building a mental model of how to look at data and get a graph out of it. And like if you ask me, uh, if you try hard enough, anything is a graph. So it's not a good idea, but that's what it is. And there's some introductions. My name is Mridul Seth. I'm one of the developers of NetworkX, and I work most of my time on NetworkX thanks to a grant from Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. So working on open source and getting paid for it. Yay! And we also have Eric Ma. Eric Ma is not present here, but he's present remotely. So if you are using Slack, there's a Slack channel called Tutorial Network Analysis. And if you want to ask a question that you think does not make sense right now to ask, right now, then you can post it in the channel, and Eric Ma would be checking their things, so uh, he can reply you in an async fashion. And we also have Dan Schult, and he's the original creator of NetworkX. So feel free to ask any questions you have. And we also have Jared Melvin. He's the release manager of NetworkX, so he's the one making all the releases. And if you have any complaints, that's the person to go to. And please grab a post-it note. If you do not have it, please raise your hand so Jared can send you one. All right. And uh, just before we start, just to get a feel and vibe of the room, how many of you are expert in Python? You know what are generators. You can you can work your way around any random Python code. All right, all right. How many of you are comfortable with Python? You know what's happening there if you read a bit of code. All right. So how many of you are comfortable with pandas? Head, tail, things like that. All right. And how many of you have used Jupyter notebooks before? Ah, perfect. See? Something to learn there. And how many of you have used my binder before? Woohoo! Well, we should have more hands there, but all right. So before we start anything, I just want to go through a bit about the Jupyter Lab interface, because this is what we will be using to go through our tutorial. So like it's almost like an IDE in a browser, and the idea is that on your left side you would see like a panel which has which is just like a file explorer, and most of our notebooks are inside this folder called notebooks, and there are different chapters, and we won't go through all of them, because if we go through all of them, that's like 8 hours of material. If you want to go, let's do that, but let's not. So uh, we'll go through a bunch of them, and the idea is that if you're really excited what you saw today, you can just go back and finish all of it, and hopefully you would have a good understanding of how to use NetworkX and how to model your data as networks with Python. So that's our goal here. And all right. So and again, like if you have never used Jupyter notebooks before, so these like in Jupyter notebooks you have like a concept called cells. In cells you can put in either code, or you can put in like just text, which is usually markdown. So here you would see a lot of text, and you can just put in code here, like a normal Python code. And I mean, it can be anything. It can be Julia code too if you want. But in this tutorial, it's all Python. And if you want to run a cell, you do shift plus enter, and that would run a cell. And as soon as you run a cell, you will have some number pop up there. Do not worry about those numbers if you're too scared by them. But yeah, so That's a Jupyter Lab UX. And again, just to reiterate, this is a tutorial. This is not a talk. That means I do not want to talk for the next 4 hours. And uh, please feel free to interject. Yeah. Oh yes, yes. I'll just bring back the URL. Uh, this is a. I mean, I was saying this is not this is not a talk, right? So I won't be talking for 4 hours, and you would get bored if I talk for 4 hours. So feel free to interject. Feel free to put up your hand up, or if you have any questions, if you have any comments, if you have anything, please feel free to please feel to stop me. And if something does not make sense, please let us know. We have a lot of people here around to help you. And yeah, 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 yeah. And yeah, like if you feel like you don't want to stop me, that's fine too. You can ask Dan. Someone will come up to you and they'll help you fix your problem. And again, there won't be any Q&A at the end, so please ask all of your questions during the tutorial. All right, so before we start, does everyone have this Jupyter Lab thing open in front in their screens? If someone does not, please let us know. We're going to write a lot of code in this, so get ready for that. And it's fine if you're too, if it's fine if you had like a big lunch and you're too lazy. In that case, if you don't really want to write code, so what you could do instead is you can all these Jupyter notebooks are a Jupyter book, so you can just browse through the notebook right here too. You don't need to run code, but I would really suggest that you actually go through the notebooks with us and go through the exercises, write some code, and it's usually fun. So, all right. So, everyone ready? All right. So, before doing any network science, let's just practice our muscles a bit with Python. All right. So, if you go to chapter 00, it's called preface. And if you open 02 prereqs.ipynb, it's a notebook, you would get this thing that pops up. Everyone here with me? Yep. All right. And also you can remove your post-its now. So we will use these post-its during the session, in the sense that there are a bunch of exercises. Once you're done with the exercise, you can put your post-it right there. So so we know that people are following along and people are not stuck. So if you have your post-it on your laptop, you can remove it right now. All right, so first exercise. Let's just look at this bit of code right here. Like if you see that generator expression, and for people who are not familiar with generator, it's fine. Don't get too worried. It's just like if you're a very lazy programmer, you don't want to write 4 lines of code. If you're writing a for loop, this is how you can write it. And you can put in a for loop, you can put in a if condition, everything in one line, and you can create a list out of it. And for the people who are experts in Python, we have some of them. So what, according to you, are plausible data structures for S and my favorite things? Any guesses? What could be my favorite things? Yes, yeah. Sorry? Yeah, exactly. So anything that you can iterate through, that is something what like my favorite things could be, because you are writing the inner loop inside is for S in my favorite things, right? So you need to iterate through it. So like list is one of them, tuple is one of them. I mean, it could be a dictionary too, and it could be basically any class that has iter dunder method implemented. So what about S? What could S be? Yep. Any guesses? I've got chocolate. Yep. So S could be a dictionary because it's like the square bracket is you're accessing one of the element one of the keys of the dictionary. So uh, now let's write some code. What is the data structure for names in this? Like how would you explain this? Exactly. So we have names, which is a list of dictionaries, and every dictionary in itself is basically like it's a way to store like your name and your surname and first name or last name. How it makes more sense. And now it's time to write some code. So if you go down, there's a function that is almost implemented, and what you need to do is this function takes in a dictionary and takes in a query for the surname or the last name, and you need to return the surname which matches exactly as in the query. You need to return the dictionary of all the people in there. And once you have implemented that, you can test it. There's a and once you're done, please put your sticker right on your laptop. Uh, like if you're stuck on binder, just refresh it. Is anyone stuck on setup yet? Yeah. Oh yeah. Can you use another browser if you have another browser? Because that white page means that binder has loaded. Jupyter Lab is not loading. So maybe you can try a new browser. But if you're still stuck, please let us know. All right. So I see a lot of stickers right there, and once you're done with your implementation, you can like remove the comments from the next cell. You can also like test your implementation. If the next cell passes without printing anything, that means it worked. Any questions till now? Any doubts? All right. So now that we have practiced our muscles a bit, now let's just look at this bit of let's look at the goals of this tutorial. And as I said, that there are two main goals here. The technical takeaway is how to basically use NetworkX. NetworkX is a graph theory library, and I like NetworkX because it has a very intuitive API, and hopefully we'll see that soon, and hopefully all of us agree with that. And basically how to use NetworkX and tools in the wider Pi data ecosystem to model your data as graphs. And the other main goal here is basically to understand how to think about data as graphs, like how things link together. So that's our Like, that's our intellectual goal here. All right, so let's move on to what are graphs? Like, what is this graphs that we keep on talking about? Like, before we talk about this, like, what do you think are graphs? Like, can anyone come up with examples? What is a graph or a network, if you may? Facebook, exactly. And how would that be a network? What are nodes or what are edges in that case? Exactly. Yeah. So for example, on Facebook, every person is a node, and if you are friends with someone, you have an edge between them. Any other examples? Remember, if you try hard enough, anything is a network. Exactly, molecules. Like molecules are a net. I mean, they are a graph, and there's a big area of actual active research into that of how to use graph theory and analyze molecules together. So yeah, they are a network too. Any more examples? Exactly. Yeah, street networks. So how does Google Maps work? I'm not saying they're using NetworkX. They shouldn't there, but it's one of the ways. How do you find the shortest path? You want to go to the nearest bakery. How do you do that? Like it's a network underneath. Any other examples? How did people who are not from Austin? How did you come here? You took a flight, right? And flights, can they be a network? So it would be a transportation network in the sense that nodes are airports, and if there is a flight between them, you have an edge between them. Then there are electricity grid networks of if there are two transmission nodes, and if there's electricity going through them, then you have this electricity grid network. Any other examples? Sorry. Yeah. So in a lot of data analysis systems now, people care about reproducibility, right? So you want to make sure that the steps that you follow are always the same, and we cannot be sure that it's always a linear path. So a lot of times you end up with this directed graph. Do this first and then do this. This is a network too, and you can analyze this information to better understand your analysis pipelines. And when we were talking about Facebook, the other example here is Twitter, right? But there is one inherent difference between Facebook network and Twitter network. Can someone think about that? What's the difference between a Facebook friendship and a Twitter follower-followee relationship? Exactly. So in Facebook, we if I'm friends with someone, they are friends back with me. That's a given. And that's not the case with Twitter. If I follow someone, that does not necessarily mean that they follow me back, right? So that's that's uh, that's something that is inherently different between these two kind of networks. So after talking about this, let's look at the formal definition of networks, or or as mathematicians like to call them, graphs. And formally, a graph or a network, I'll use this term interchangeably. A graph is usually, it's if you talk to people who come from a maths background, they know this data structure from graph theory, so they call it graph. If you talk to the cool kids in data science, they know it from network science, so they call it as networks. But they're the same thing. Graphs or networks, in this context, they're the same thing. So formally, coming back to this, there's a node set and there's an edge set. The node set is basically a set of all nodes, and an edge set is the relationship between them. So if there is an edge between two nodes, they would come up in this edge set. I use the term set here. What does that tell us? Sorry. Exactly. So there's no first node in a network. I mean, you could model your data that there is first node, but by in itself, there's no such thing as first five nodes in the network because it's unordered. Like you cannot, for example, in a pandas data frame, there is this there's a certain sense of order in that. This is the first five elements, but you cannot have that in a normal graph. That there's no such thing as this is the first node, this is the second node, or this is the 10th node. And the other thing is that it's unique. You cannot have the same node multiple times. Again, there are cases where you could, but if you're talking about a simple graph, you cannot. And this is why that set term is important, and we should keep that in mind. And we'll use that later on. And all right, so examples of network. Now that we have a formal definition, can someone come up with any other thing that I can think of? What could be a network?
Any type of code.
How would that be a network?
Well, in Python, for instance, that is parsed into an AST.
Yes, yeah. So if you look into like the compiler of like the first step of a compiler would be to create an abstract syntax tree of your code. So it basically parses your Python code. Like if you have a script, it will parse it and it will create a sort of network of like how to do what to do. So even writing code, like to run that code, you need graph theory. And this is one of the reasons there's something called graphlib inside the the core Python implementation. And because they need certain methods from graph theory to analyze and run the Python code. All right, so we already discussed this types of graph. It's mainly there are two types of graph. Again, I stressing on the term mainly. It's when you have directions. It's a directed graph, and that's, for example, Twitter. And if you do not have directions, then it's something like Facebook. So, okay, quick question. So, what would be a flight network be? Is it a directed network or an undirected network? Exactly. So, I mean, technically it should be an undirected network in the sense that if there's a flight from point A to B, there should be a flight from point B to A, but that's not always the case. So that's why you need to model this as an directed network, and because the flight just goes one way, it can go back, but that's another edge in that network. They are not the same edges. So that's a directed network, and we have the undirected network. And I mean, there are a bunch of other networks that you can come up with, but at least in this tutorial, we'll just focus on these two things. And like this is something that one of my co-authors of this tutorial, he really likes. Like according to him, he according to someone he knows edges define the most interesting part of the graph, in the sense that nodes in themselves do not really teach you that much. It's just a set of something, right? What's the fun part is how they are connected, right? So that's like the study of graph theory on network science is basically analyzing those relationships. So the heart of a network lies inside the edges, not exactly the nodes. I mean, the nodes can have some information, but that's not necessarily what brings you to use network science to analyze your data. All right, so enough talking about graphs and the philosophy behind that. Let's look at some code. And for this notebook, you can go into notebooks 01 introduction, and we are on the second notebook. It's called the NetworkX API. And in this notebook, we'll just look at the data model of NetworkX. And again, NetworkX is only one of the packages in the broader ecosystem, like broader Python ecosystem. There are a bunch of other packages, and all of them have their trade-offs and design choices. We will use NetworkX. There are other like iGraph. There's GraphTool. There is NetworkKit. There are a bunch of other networks, a bunch of other packages out there. But I like NetworkX, so that's why we see this here. So let's start. So in NetworkX, everything is a dictionary. Asterisk right now, and this may change in the future, but at least for right now, everything is a dictionary. And like the data structure would be like if you want to access like node attributes or edge attributes, then it's like a dictionary of a dictionary of a dictionary. It's all the way dictionaries down here. So and because it's modeled as a dictionary, like if you know how to work with like Python dictionaries, a lot of this syntax would make sense. So like if you want to access a node that you have added inside this network, you would do like g.nodes and square brackets, and you just you just try to get that node. And in the case for edges, you could use this syntax, which is g.edges, node 1 comma node 2, and it will give you all the information about that particular edge. And so let's play around with some data first. So this data set comes from a study of like 7th grade students. And what they do is that they go to a bunch of students and ask them that, who do you want to do this activity A with? Like, do you want to play basketball? Like, who would you like to choose, like, from your classmates? And people go around and they point towards people, and they ask this question for 3 different activities to every student. And that's how we'll get something called weight later in the network. But before we jump into that, let's just look at some things here. So if you do like type of G, so it will tell us that this is a directed graph. And this makes sense in this case is because if a person says that I want to play basketball with this other student, that does not necessarily mean the other student wants to play basketball with you. So life is tough. And so that's why like this is a quick sanity check. If you want to make sure how your graph object looks like, is you do type of G, and it will tell you what it is right now. So it's a directed graph right now. Everyone with me till now? Any questions? Any doubts? All right. And please feel free to interject or raise your hand, please. And if it were a normal graph, in the sense that if it were just a undirected graph or a normal graph, if we did a type of edge, we would get something like NetworkX classes graph. Like the main thing that you need to worry about is this digraph and this graph. Like you can just ignore the first 3 bits there. And so this nice looking thing is like if you want to access all the nodes in the network. And in my opinion, for example, this is like if you want to find all the nodes, you just do g.nodes. G is our graph object here, and we'll get all the nodes. And because the nodes are named 1, 2, 3, 4, they can be anything. Like in this case, the data set does not actually give us the names of the students, because I don't think that's a good idea. And but anything can be a node in a NetworkX graph, and I mean anything. Again, anything hashable can be a node in a NetworkX graph. And if you do not know what's hashable, it's fine. So, for an example, like integers can be nodes, as we see here, see it here. Strings, like actual names in this case, could be nodes. Images, an image can be a node too here. Like a sound wave, which is encoded properly, can be can be a node too. Another NetworkX graph can be a node. So you can basically create a NetworkX graph where nodes are graphs. So endless options. You can go crazy. And so this is like if you want to access nodes, you do g.nodes. It gives you a nice, like, what's inside. And there were 29 students, so in this case it's just 1 to 29 integers. And but sometimes, what if you had like a 10,000 nodes in here? What would happen is g.nodes will print out all those 10,000 nodes. You don't always want that. So if you are a Python person, you would think that, I mean, it says a node view, but it looks like a container or like a list. So your first guess would be, oh, I'll just slice it. That should work. Well, you're wrong. It doesn't work. But it will give you a nice little error message here that because of technical implementation details, you need to first cast this whole thing to list. So now it creates an actual list. Till now, but as soon as you did g.nodes, you were just looking at thing. It's a node view. So you're just viewing at the internal data structure. You're not really creating anything new. But as soon as you do list of g.nodes, you have this new thing. You have this new container which has all of your nodes. And because it's now it's just a list, you can slice it as you like. So this is like the first 5 nodes. Again, it's not first in the sense it's just a sample of 5 nodes. Let's say that. Yeah. Yep.
If you have like 1,000
Yep.
nodes or you still need like a flash to cast it to this.
I mean, if you want to slice it, then yes. If you do not want to slice it, then no. Like, because you cannot slice the underlying node view that you get. Yeah, and
Like if you want to take like just like a bottom core network, and then new network,
ah
like that.
yeah, like that's something that we'll look at later, and that's called like a subgraph. You can create like smaller graphs out of your graph, but we'll look at that in a later notebook. So, and if you want to find the total number of how many nodes are there, you could do length of g.nodes, and here it would give you the answer. There are 29 nodes, or 29 students in this network. You could also just do length of g. That works too. So it will give you the total length, or total number of nodes inside the network. And there is another thing that you should know about. It's called in NetworkX. It's not just the node. You can also keep on putting data inside the node, because and if you want to look at the data, you can do something like this. And these are called node attributes in graph theory / network science, and you can keep on putting data into that. For example, in the case of Facebook, that data could be just you have like a unique ID is your node ID. Then you can have the name, where do they live, how many how many Facebook groups they're part of, things like that. You can keep on adding new data into that node, which gives you more information, and which you can use that while you're further analyzing your data. And just like g dot nodes, it gives you a node data view, and you need to first cast this to a list, and then you can slice it. If you just want just a bit of you just want to have a look at what is actually coming out of this, right? So, and you can also go in, and because it's a dictionary underneath, g.nodes also work with the square brackets. And if you do g.nodes and put in a node inside with square brackets, it will just give you all the attributes that are stored inside that node data dictionary. And in our case, we just have this one attribute with every node. It's the gender of the student, and because all of these are like iterators, in the sense that you can write a for loop through it. So if it were a list, you could just do for I in this list, do keep on doing something. And because it's an iterator, you can just write a normal Python for n comma d in g.nodes. It's basically like N becomes your node, and D becomes the data of that node. And uh, it's pretty like analogous to, like, what a dictionary would work like if you do dictionary.items, because a dictionary would have a key and a value. And in G dot nodes data true, it works like a dictionary in the sense that there is a key, which is a node, and the value is all the data of that node. All right, so it's time to do some exercise. So now we need to count how many males and how many females are represented in the graph. And you need to write a function called node metadata. And once you're done, please feel free to, add a sticker, put the sticker on your laptop. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. Any doubts? Is anyone stuck at this at setup right now? If you're stuck, that's perfectly fine too. And I mean, either you can ask us, we can come and help you, or you can also look at the answer. And I mean, again, that's just one way of doing it. Especially in this question, there are multiple ways of doing this one. And to actually look at the answer, what you could do is, like, because we are importing this thing called node metadata, and with the beauty of Jupyter, like IPython, you can, if you put in like two question marks in front of the function name, it will print you the signature of the function and the actual source code of the function. So and if you're done with it, you can run the next cell to see if your code actually passes this test. If the code passes the test, hopefully it's right. And also like if you're done, feel free to help your neighbor. It's a NetworkX tutorial, like network. Yep, sure. Yes. If you go back a bit down there, is this gone down now? Sorry, what's happening here is that this NAMP thing, like an internal library, and you need to like install it. So, it should- uh, like if you're having this error that says nams is not imported, and like you can't import this nams thingy, then you need to run python setup.py develop. Like honestly, in that case, just go to binder and start doing it on binder, because that's just a local configuration thing, and it would be better if we just use binder, because debugging that can take some time. All right, uh, let's jump forward to the next bit. It's fine if you're not done. It's perfectly fine. And like this is one of the solutions, and here we are using something called a counter. And like collections is it's inside the standard library of Python, and this is one of the most I feel like underutilized, underloved package. So it has a lot of fun things, and you can just pass in counter, and it will literally count. Like if you pass counter to a list, it will count everything for you and return that thing as a dictionary. So see, you don't have to write a lot of code. And if we do that, we have our mf counts, and if we run this is how it would look like. And again, this is just one way of doing it. There are multiple ways of doing this exercise. All right, let's move forward. So just like nodes, the other important bit is edges, right? So, and just like nodes, if you want to access edges, it's just as simple as that. We do g.edges, and there are your edges. But it's a lot of them, right? We don't really want to see all of them. We'll just do just like list them, like cast them to a list. Let's just look at 5 edges, and this is how they look like. There's an edge between 1 and 2. There's an edge between 1 and 3. There's an edge between 1 and 4, and there are bunch of edges there. And if we do length of g.edges, that it says there are 376 edges in here. So that means there are like in those 29 students, like the nodes in the network, there are 376 relationships between them. And this is possible, like, because this is a special kind of network, in the sense that it's possible that there are way too many edges here, because a student A could say 3 different students for like 3 different activities, right? So there are a lot of edges right here, and usually the networks are not this dense, in the sense that if you have 1,000 nodes, you will not have you won't have like 100,000 edges in that. So now let's look at just like node attributes. There is something called edge attributes, in the sense that you can keep on stacking more data inside the edge, and which gives us a lot of information. And like, for example, if we go to the airport network, you could add information like to like in a flight, like what's the price of that flight, and if you what's the price of the flight, what's like how much time does it take. All of this information can go into the edge between airport A and airport B. So, and in this case, our information is count. And how this count is calculated in the data set is, if the student 1 chose the student 2 for one activity, you get count 1. If the student 1 chose student 3 for, like, if they chose it for two activities, you get the count 2. And for example, in this case, student 1 chose 6 for like three activities, so they can they can play three activities with them. And just to access the edges, this is how you could do that. 15 comma 10, basically it's like, if you want to find if there's an edge between 15 and 10, and what's the data in there, this is how you can access that. And if you try to access, for example, if you do like 15 comma 16, it will give you a key error. And when this pops up, this means that there's no edge between them, in the sense that you are at node 15 and you're trying to get the information between 15 and 16, but because there is no there's no edge between them, you would get this error that pops up. And just like node views that we saw and the edge views we saw, again, it's just a dictionary. And if you want to iterate through it, so you can do like for n1 comma n2 comma d, which is basically like the node 1 of the edge, the node 2 of the edge, and the data of that edge. And if you want to iterate through that, this is how you usually write that for loop. And once you know how to write this for loop, let's do another exercise. And in this exercise, we are just like we are writing a test, in the sense that just to make sure that the data that we read in is sane, in the sense that the data is not corrupted. We need to verify that the maximum times any student rated another student as their favorite is 3 times, because that's the maximum. If there's a 4 in there, that means something is wrong with that data. So that's the next exercise, to write this edge metadata function. And just like before, if you want to look at one of the answers, you can pass in like 2 question marks, and it will give you one of the answers of how to write this. And if you are done, please put a sticker back of your laptop. And if you have any questions, if you're stuck, please let us know. And also, if I'm too slow for you, there's good news. There's a lot of material in there, so feel free to go ahead. I won't take any offense. Please feel free to go through all of it. And if I'm too fast, please let me know, because I don't want that. And feel free to discuss the answers with your neighbor. It's not an exam. And if you have written the function, please run the next cell to make sure that it works.
what's the difference between an out edge view and an out edge data view?
So with an out edge view, you would get only the edges, and as soon as you get the data view thing, it gives you the edges and the data of the thing. So for example, if you do
Oh, here it's down. Yeah.
yeah, like for example, if you do g dot edges, it will give you out edge thing, and I mean, there are like two ways of doing this. If you pass in data as an argument, you get this out edge data view, and you can also do this, and it will also give you the data. So
And it's called out edges because they're going out from the node, and you can
Yep.
also do an in edge.
yeah, like because this is a directed graph, there is a notion called as Dan mentioned, like an out edge. Like it's basically like there's an edge going from 1 to 2. That does not mean that there's an edge from 2 to 1. All right, let's look at the answer quickly. So, like one of the answers again. There are a lot of ways of doing this. So in this case, we basically iterate through the edges and data. Data equals true in this case, and we extract the count from every data dictionary of an edge. So we get a list of all the counts. If you print this out, so basically it's the first edge has 1, the second edge has 1, so on. And to make sure that the maximum of this is 3, we could just do the max of counts, and we get 3. So there was no 4 here. That's a good news. And let's jump to the third bit of this notebook. It's called manipulating the graph. So right now what we did was we just read in the graph, and there are some custom functions that are written inside this tutorial. So if you go to the home directory and open this thing called nams folder, you can actually look at what is happening underneath. So when we are loading this seventh grader network, it's reading a CSV file, which it uses pandas to read that CSV file. It makes some adjustments to that, and then you create a graph using this CSV file. I mean, you can look at this code if you want, and this is how we built the graph that we are playing with right now. But what if once playtime is over, now you want to manipulate the graph? You want to add new nodes. You want to remove something. There's something wrong with it. You want to fix that, right? So. And this is where I like NetworkX. The API is very intuitive. So if you want to add a node, you do g add node, and you can add a node. And this function is pretty flexible in the sense that you can add a node, and this node bit could be an integer, could be any hashable thing, and you can keep on adding node attributes, and that is basically you can just name it anything. You pass in the value. You can keep on. There's no limit to that. You can keep on doing that. And just like add node, there's add edge. But in add edge, you need to pass in 2 nodes because every edge needs 2 nodes. And so you need node 1 and node 2. And just like add node, in add edge, you can pass in edge attributes by naming them whatever you want them to be named. And let's just do a quick exercise about this. So in this exercise, we found out that we missed 2 people in our network. So we need to add 2 nodes. It's called node 30 and node 31. Not so great names, but that's how the people are named. And we need to add and they love hanging out with each other. So if you ask them, they just this is the person I'm going to do my my activity A with my activity B with an activity C with. So you need to add these edges in the network and the nodes with the proper metadata, and and you need to write this function g adding students, and this is the answer right here if anyone wants to. Yep.
The is the speed of access, is that like feature, is that like patterns? So if you add a node, is that a one?
Yeah, it's a dictionary that's getting added into that. And remember, this is a directed graph. So if you add an edge from 1 to 2, that does not mean that you're adding an edge from 2 to 1. So keep that in mind.
Is it a good idea to make a copy?
Um,
Is it expensive? That's the real question.
it's expensive in the sense that you are creating a new copy.
Would you do that? I mean, is that something that's recommended that you do it non-destructive, so you create a copy, make a change, and return a copy, or
It's a
is it up to you?
it's a personal opinion. Like
That's a bigger graph.
yeah.
Yeah, a really huge graph, don't
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah, don't do this if you have like a million nodes. Don't do that. Yeah.
Because it's a directed graph, is there like a way to say add edge and to not manually not to repeat the operation, but just changing the node?
No, not yet.
Yeah, actually, the G.dot copy should be in that's
Yeah.
like
Yeah, I mean, I think this was added because it's a function, right? And you want that contained function. So, I mean, you don't need that g dot copy here, but it's just if you want that data to be encapsulated inside that thing. And once you're done with this, feel free to run the next cell, and it will, like, if everything passes, you'll get a beautiful all test passed. And if you're stuck, feel free to like call us out, or if you don't want to do that, you can just look at the answer by doing adding students and then like put in 2 question marks, and Jupyter will help you there. We'll soon take a break. Please don't worry about that. All right, let's have a look at the answer, and we can do like g add node 30 comma basically put in all the metadata in here, and we can do g dot add edge and keep on doing that with the uh, count as the data edge attribute, and uh, and then we can test this, right? You should always test even your data. Like a lot of people don't do that, but we should test a lot of data too. So uh, so this is one way of doing that. There are also other methods, and if you have used NetworkX before, you would know them. But let's not go into that. And like this bit is just like some opinions in the sense that how to work with like like NetworkX objects, because it's a dictionary, right? So you can write these quick list comprehensions. They are very efficient, like in the sense that if you're writing a for loop, if you do like for n in something, and then you write that 3-4 line for loop, if you can condense that to a list comprehension, in my opinion, it's more readable. Plus, it's more efficient. So if you're ever in that situation, please try to write these list comprehensions. And if you really want to go deep into the API, you can look at the network docs, and you can go to this thing called references, and it's basically like all the functions and everything that's implemented in NetworkX. And when we have dark mode, then if that makes any difference to you, so please feel free to go through the documentation. And we're gonna have a break now for like maybe 10 minutes. Go do whatever you want. And but if you really want to do this, there are some further exercises that you can do in the break, but you're not required to do that. And or you can do it like once you go back home. But yeah, so let's break for 10 minutes and meet at 2:52 or like 2:50. All right, let's start back. Everyone is ready. Let's talk about visualization for a bit. And this notebook is again like notebooks 01 introduction. The third notebook, it's called Viz for visualization. And this is like, don't worry, in this notebook we don't do a lot of exercises. This is just looking at pretty pictures and like appreciating the beauty of pretty pictures. And in this notebook we would show like there's an inbuilt visualization in NetworkX, but there's also another package called NXViz, and it's created by one of the co-authors, Eric Ma, and we look at that, and it can give you a bunch of very nice pretty pictures without doing a lot of customization. So let's jump in. All right, so let's load that seventh grader network that we had in our last notebook again. And there's a function called nx.draw. That's it. You do nx.draw, you pass in a graph object, and you'll get this beauty. So what's wrong with this? Or is there, oh, let me ask. Is there anything wrong with this? Or like, is this beautiful? Yes, that's subjective, but the thing is that we can't really make anything out of it, in the sense that I don't know, like at least when I like to play around with data, the first thing, I don't want to run any like hardcore analysis on it. I just want to like plot it somehow and try to deduce something out of it. Can I just get a a vibe of the data just by looking at a plot? The thing with that is that just looking at this doesn't really tell us much. We see that there's like a very hairballish thing. That's the technical term, hairball. So there's something very like dense happening inside, but we don't get much information out of it. So I mean, like we can see that there are arrows there, so like it means that it's directed. So that's something. And we can also tell NetworkX to draw this with labels, and maybe you get a bit more information. You can see that. And you have these nodes that are swinging around, and there are a lot of customization. So like everything underneath here, it's matplotlib. So what you could do is, if you go to like nx draw NetworkX nodes, and for people who have never who haven't worked with Jupyter notebooks a lot, as soon as you write, draw, if you hit tab, it will give you a bunch of options. So you don't have to write everything. See? Programmers are lazy. We'll do everything for this. So if you do if you do draw network X nodes and you pass in this two question marks, it basically gives us the signature and like the documentation. So we can have a look at this. So there's something called node size. So if we go back, we can control the node size just by putting here node size. If we do node size, let's make it a bit smaller. Let's do 50. By default, it's something called 300. You don't need to worry about that. But okay, so now nodes are a bit smaller. Again, doesn't help much. So let's do. There's an option called width. This controls the width of the edge. So the thing is that because there's so many edges, it's very dark. It's very hard to find anything. So if we just make it 0.1, then let's see what happens. All right, so it's something. Again, it doesn't really telling you a lot of things, but the thing that I wanted to show you here is that there are a lot of there are a lot of options. There are a lot of knobs that you can turn around to get your pretty picture, which is inside the basic draw package of NetworkX. But if you do not want to do that, you could use something like NXWiz. Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe you're going to get into this, but it appears that all the graphs are being drawn in some kind of deterministic way. What is that?
It's not actually right now. It's random. It's not deterministic.
I'm getting it looks like I'm getting the identical thing over here.
Yeah. That's probably by coincidence, but it's like when you just do NX.draw, it's basically giving you a random layout. You can have like a proper deterministic layout if you do like something like draw circular. In this case, what happens is that it will lay out all the nodes in a circular fashion. And if you do there are a bunch of layouts out there. So there's draw circular, there is like the Kamada Kawaii layout, there's shell layout. If we do this, it will and there are a bunch of algorithms out there of how to plot these things. And it's a pretty hard problem, how to visualize a big graph. It's not an easy thing. It's a hard problem. So just calculating the layout can be that thing itself can be pretty expensive sometimes. So it could take some time to calculate the layout, and yeah. So in short, it's a hard problem, and a lot of people are working on that. It's an active research area of how to show a graph. So let's.
What's the default do?
Default is
Spring layout, right?
yeah. Oh yeah, Spring layout, and Spring gives you random, right? It's
So it's not arbitrary. I mean, difference between
Yeah,
random
yeah,
and not random.
yeah. I mean, it's called the Spring layout, but you cannot you cannot guarantee that you'll get the exact same picture every time. You would get the exact same layout, but not the exact same location of the nodes. Sorry. Yes, you can. Yeah, yes, you can. Yeah, it would. Then in that case, it should give you the same one. But but honestly, I would suggest not to use just the NX draw. Like if you want to build a publication quality picture from NX draw package, try to look at. So basically, there are 3-4 functions. It's called draw NetworkX nodes, draw NetworkX edges, draw NetworkX edge labels, and labels. So basically, in this way, you can control a lot of things, how the nodes are plotted, how they look like, how big they are, what's their shape, what's their color, and with edges, you can control all the edges. So if you want, there are a lot of examples in our documentation. So if you go to networkx.org and let's just go here. If you go to gallery, so let's play. There are a bunch of let me just dark mode. I don't like dark mode. So if you look at this, pretty pictures, there are a lot of there's a lot of examples how to plot these things. So you can look at the gallery examples, and we use you can use something like GraphViz, and you can print out a bunch of pretty pictures. But yeah, But if you don't want to do that much effort, what you can do is use NXWiz, and NXWiz has a bunch of inbuilt things that you don't like. Once you get a hang of it, you don't need to worry too much about it. So let's look at something called the matrix plot. So till now, like for example, if we look at this bit right here, I mean, this makes sense in the sense that we know it's a node. There's an edges. Nodes are blue dots. Edges are lines, and that's what you would picture. And this is a network, but there's something like a matrix. So there's a very close relationship between linear algebra and graph theory, because you can represent a graph as a matrix pretty easily, and in the sense that if you have like a matrix, and like where the rows are all the nodes, and the columns are also all the nodes, and if there's an edge between those two nodes, there's a one there. If not, there's a zero there. So in this case, like if you look at this matrix right here, if you look at what's inside here, is there something that we can deduce from this? Like, do you see any pattern, some sort of anything? It's not symmetric, yeah. So the first thing is that if you look at the diagonal, it's not symmetric, and that is expected because this is a directed network. So if there's an edge between 1 to 2, that does not mean there's an edge from 2 to 1. So that is one thing that we could just look at this matrix plot and deduce. Any other deductions?
Could you say more girls?
Yep. So that like for in this case we get that we get that deduction from the node attributes that are also plotted. Yeah. So there seems like there are no connections here. You could say that. Any other let's look at the diagonal. What's happening at the diagonal? And by diagonal I mean this. It's not from top to bottom, it's from bottom to top. What could we say about that? It's empty. Yes. So there are no self edges, in the sense that it's good in this case because we know the context, right? Which means that there's no student in the class who went like, who's your favorite person? They didn't say me. So we don't have a lot of narcissists in those classes, which is a good thing. So you can have self edges in a NetworkX graph, but in this case we don't have any self edge, in the sense that there's no node which has a connection to itself, and that's why for example, this thing is empty. And again, this is something that we can just look at a matrix plot and just know that if the diagonal is empty, there are no self edges.
What is the order? Maybe
Sorry.
from the direct graph, right? So
Yeah.
from bottom to side, or from side to bottom? What is the
Is it like
Honestly, I don't remember. I need to look at that. But yeah, so the two directions we have is the diagonal is empty, that no student is a narcissist, and the matrix is asymmetric, which means it's not like, if it were an undirected graph, it would be perfectly symmetric. And again, like in the spirit of pretty pictures, then there's something called an arc plot, and what it does is it's again plotting the things that we have, but because we are grouping the nodes in a sensible fashion. So like the first big problem of any visualization thing here is how to plot the nodes. Like once that is solved, then you can worry about the edges. So in this case, if we just create just like a straight line and group the nodes, then we can get this plot. Like, do we get any information out of this plot? Like, look.
direction's not in there anywhere, right?
Sorry, there's no directions in here right now.
You see the amount of female
Yeah.
Other than that,
Yeah.
no.
I mean,
Some
like,
people are either like a lot or like a lot.
yeah. Yeah. So that's one deduction, right? So this is like Circo's plot is just like our plot is just to create a circle out of it, and again, pretty picture, right? So I like in at least in this case, you can't really you can't really deduce something that is very clear right now, at least for this data set. But this is another nice plot that we'll see later on of how we can deduce things if it matches the data. In this case, we can't, and that's perfectly fine because the point of quick visualization is that can I figure out something just by just doing like a quick dirty visualization? That's what I need. Right now we cannot, which is perfectly fine. Now this is one of my favorite plots. It's called the hive plot. So what's happening? Let me zoom in here. So what's happening right here is there are two types of relationships right here. There is one is intra community and one is inter community. So can we make any deductions right there? That is one. I mean, again, this is just a guess. That's fine because we don't have the actual numbers. So, like, if we have something, the whole point is that if we start with a deduction, we can actually look at the numbers. So we know where to investigate at, and like you can look at this bit here, in the sense that it seems like there's a uniform distribution at one side, but not on the other side. It could mean anything, but it doesn't really mean anything. But that's again something that you know that you can start go look at and think about it. And yep.
And if you go back to the headline, in the photo side, like, is it like in the female male side?
Which one?
Like because we have like raised and
Yep.
raised down.
Yeah, this one. I mean, like these are the ones that we added at the end. So like the add node. I mean, it's just plotting them. You just keep it up.
Okay, so it's not saying that no female wants to play with male.
No, it's not.
I'm still not getting the plot. What do I see? Would you mind explaining?
Yeah. So like let's just concentrate here. Like so, this is the intra-community plot, in the sense that like if we have two types of nodes in a network, how are the nodes in one one community? I'm using that word, but that's not the right word. In one community are connected to each other, and so this is in this case this female to female interaction is what's represented right here, and this thing is representing the interaction between two different communities.
Does that mean the males on the
Yeah.
bottom left have no connection to the?
Yeah.
There's very few connections.
Yeah, that's what it means. And again, like in this, like it's just a way to show it. Like we are not necessarily getting the best picture here because maybe this is not the best data set for it, but it's one way if you want to look at inter-community connections and intra-community of how things are connected inside a community and how things are connected outside a community, then you can look at hive plot.
Is it always broken into those
Yep.
parts, or is it just?
Yeah, it's just broken into the two parts. I mean, like if you take your network and if you can bifurcate them into two types of nodes, then you can look at this this dynamic. Does that make sense? For example, it's very much possible that if you have, let's assume you have a network of your local your local internet network, in the sense that you have a bunch of servers, right? And you want to create silos out of that. So what you want is a lot of interconnection between these things, but you do not want a lot of connections here because you want silos. So this is one way of quickly picturing that. Oh, do I have silos or not? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Just to clarify, this type of graph doesn't, this kind of plot doesn't have any information about directness, right?
No. I mean, I think you could, but not this plot. But all right. So this is the most important part is how to make nodes. That's the $1 million question. It's an active research area. No one knows the answer for this, but it's a hard thing. If anyone figures it out, well, you will $1 million. So go work on that if anyone wants to do that. But yeah, so that was a quick detour to visualization. And
I think
yes, sorry.
Is there any plotting technique that somehow that clusters a little bit automatically? Like if you have loosely connected something
Yeah.
else?
So in that case, what you need to do is first you need to calculate those clusters, and that I think we won't look at that in this tutorial, but there's something called community detection. You can basically you can find those communities, and then you need to manually put in the positions for that nodes.
Okay, so we're not.
Yeah, there's no automatic way. Not that I'm aware of. You need to first calculate the community to get the layout, and then you can plot them out. But yeah, that's the way I think it is the right now. And again, like this is just if you want to stay in the NetworkX land, this is how you plot it. But there are a lot of other tools out there. There's something called Gephi, which is used a lot, and like if you want, you can use that. Then if you have like huge data sets, and by huge I mean like millions of nodes, then there's something called data shader, which has pretty nice techniques of plotting these things. And so yeah, like if you have any other questions about visualizations, feel free to ask me about it later. So yeah.
If you draw a spectral, you might be able to get some of that clustering, some of the clustering.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah,
I was just wondering if that's something that you
but
I don't know if this one, but we do have it in NetworkX. It may not be great, but
yeah.
it's not needed for that.
Yeah.
It does use that.
And yeah, so let's now we have looked at the API of what are graphs. We have looked at a bit of visualization. So let's do some analysis now. So we are gonna look at three things. It's called hubs, paths, and structures. And if you actually go look at the documentation, that's not just three things. Like there are a lot of things that you can do it. So there are a lot of algorithms, and you can go read the documentation if you fancy that. But we're gonna focus on just these three things, which are usually the most important thing, in the sense that this is the main thing that at least I would do. If you give me a network data set, these are the questions that I want to ask. So the first notebook is hubs. So if you want to access notebooks, you go to notebooks, you go to 02 algorithms, and you put 01 hubs. And in this notebook, let's look at hubs. And fortunately or unfortunately, this is a great thing for contact tracing. And so I don't know, if you want to find patient 0, if you want to find how certain diseases spread in the wild, so you can use you can try to find which is the most important node. If this person has something, it will spread quickly, right? So it's about finding important nodes. And in some cases you want to find important nodes because it's good, and in certain cases you want to find nodes which are bottlenecks in some sort, in the sense that if something happens to this node, we are in big trouble. In the sense that, assume it's an airline network, right? If for example, if you look at a very important airport, and the computers stop working there, then it can disrupt the whole system, right? So it's important to this also happens in electricity grid networks, finding that that weak bottleneck there. So you should have enough redundancy in the network to make sure that you never hit the bottleneck. And if something happens to the important node, there's backup there. So this is why finding hubs is important in a network data set. So, and interestingly, we have a very nice data set for this. It's called the socio patterns data set. And the way this was collected was it was at a conference / art exhibition. And what they did was they asked all the attendees, I think they gave them some sort of a beeper or something. And if you are, you walk around a conference, you talk with people, you network, you create networks. And the way this data set works is that if two people were around each other for 20 seconds, it's just an assumption that if you're standing next to each other for 20 seconds, you may talk, right? So that's the assumption here. And if if you are near each other for 20 seconds, then there's an edge between you. So this is how the data set was built. And now let's see, how the interactions went ahead. All right, so this, like when we load the graph object and we do a type of G, we get graph. Why is this not a directed graph? Why is this a normal graph? Because I mean, in the sense that if I'm talking to someone at a conference, they may not talk back to me, but still, it's we are near together. So in the case if you want to contact trace, it's important to know who's next to each other. So let's just look at quick things of what's inside the network. So if you do length of g dot nodes and length of g dot edges, or you can just do print g, it will say that graph has 410 nodes and 2,700 edges, which means that there are 410 attendees in this conference and around 2,700 relationships that were formed. And so let's look at the first measure of importance. Let's call that. So let's ask. Your job is you work in the data science team at Twitter, and your job is to find the most important users, the most important tweeters. I think that's whatever they're called. And what would be your first guess? How do you find that? How would you say someone is an important person on Twitter? It's not a trick question. It's very yeah, followers. You just look at number of followers, right? So in graph theory term, network science term, that is something called neighbors. If a node is connected to a lot of other nodes, that may mean that the node is important. Again, it's not an absolute. That may mean something. Like for example, in a conference, who would you think would be the most connected person, in the sense that who would have the most interactions? Any guesses? The speaker? Yes. Any other guesses? The? Yeah, could be. Yeah. Sorry?
The admin stuff.
Yes. Yes, this is the answer that I love. If someone is going at a conference, you have to talk to the person at check-in, right? So it's usually the check-in person who is the most connected person, or sometimes the keynote speaker. The important people. Everyone wants to talk to them. So that's that. Again, this is not absolute science. It's just it's a measure. It's what you make out of it, in the sense that if this measure works in your context, then it's the right measure. But there's no one right thing here. So let's you can calculate the neighbors of a node by just using .g.neighbors. And for example, if you want to find the neighbors of node 7, you do g.neighbor7. It will return you something called dict key iterator. Whenever you see something like this and you are scared, don't be. Your solution to all problems in life is cast it to a list. And this is what happens. And once you do that, so you can see that node 7, whoever that person is, also interacted with node 5, node 6, node 21, and so on. But there were 400 nodes in the network. And we do see that this node didn't really interact with anyone in hundreds, 200s, 300s, and 400s. Keep that in mind. We'll use that later. And one sad bit about this key iterator is that you can't directly do length of g.neighbors. You first need to cast it to the list, and you do length, and you basically find the number of neighbors. So the number of neighbors of node 7 is 7. That's not by design. That's just by chance. So yep. And now the exercise comes. We need to find the most important person in this conference, not in this conference, in the dataset conference. And that's the exercise. So you need to find, you need to create a data frame or a panda series. I mean, you can create whatever. You just need to find the most important person and like the node ID of that person. And once you find that, shout it out. I mean, there are a couple of hints there, but you don't need to use pandas if you do not want to. And if you're too tired after a long day, you can just look at the answer. So there are two different types of implementations. There's a third answer too. And if you come up with an answer which is very different from either of these three techniques, please, you can like this is all available on GitHub. You can actually submit that as a fourth answer.
You say there are two up there?
There are three.
Three.
Yeah. And I can't show all three in one, but
You can just use the max function, right? I guess none of them do that.
yeah. And because
Oh, I will go submit it.
yeah, because you're only supposed to use neighbors right now.
Oh,
Like after this exercise, you will realize that this was a pointless exercise. You didn't have to do it
yeah, right.
because there's an inbuilt function to do this. If you're done with the exercise, please feel free to shout out the answer. Which node has the most number of neighbors?
If you want.
Yeah. So uh, let's move forward, and so we see that node 51 is connected to 50 neighbors, node 272 is connected to 47, and so on. So we could say that node 51 may be an important person, or maybe the person at check-in. So and we don't know, but we could say something about our data that in our data set, node 51 or node 272, these are important people, and in case they had some sort of disease that spreads through air, that's bad because it will spread fast. If that was the case with node 98, no worries. Node 98 only interacted with one other person. So, see, maybe being an introvert sometimes helps. All right, so what we saw right now is called neighbors, and if you want to come up with a fancy term to to show people, you can call this degree centrality. And there are a lot of different centrality measures. Like degree centrality is one of them, and I think that's like the most common sense one, in the sense that you look at how many nodes you're connected to. That's it. But the problem with this is that there's no way to compare it with two different graphs. So, like if in graph one, the top node has 30 neighbors, and in graph two, the top node has 20 neighbors. You can't really compare them. You need to know how many nodes were there in the graph, right? So, to do this, people came up with degree centrality, in the sense that you have a normalized version of like the number of nodes I'm connected to versus the total possible number of nodes I could have been connected to in the graph. So what, like suppose there are n nodes in a network. How many nodes can one node connect to? There are n nodes. Like how many nodes can one node to connect to? N minus 1. I mean, that's the right answer. But it depends, like how you define connection. So, like if you allow self loops, then you can connect to yourself, right? But the general answer is n minus 1, because in a simple graph, you do not want to allow self edges. And like when you calculate degree centrality in NetworkX, it does n minus 1. The denominator is n minus 1. It's not n. And like the function I made you write in the last thing, you didn't even have to write that. You would have just done nx dot degree centrality. Oops. Yep. Sorry about that. You would have done nx dot degree centrality, and it will return you a dictionary with the key as the node and the value as the degree centrality of that node. And like because it's a dictionary, and if you want to do some fancy things, you can cast it as a pandas series. Then you can sort them. You can do things with that what you do with pandas series. And so like you can sort it like this. And as you can see, node 51. Now we get that node 51 has the highest degree centrality, which is expected because we had node 51 with the highest number of neighbors. And this degree centrality is just a normalized version. It's just a, don't get scared by the term degree centrality. But yeah, so this is one way of calculating centrality. There are a lot of other ways, and all of those ways are implemented. Like not all, but a lot of them are implemented in NetworkX. And you need to, like I would suggest, go read the documentation and see which centrality measures make sense for your case. So please do that. And and there is another thing that makes makes a network in the sense that you can look at how things are distributed, in the sense of, for example, how is degree distributed. Like let's talk about Twitter right now. Again, Twitter, like what would you expect the distribution of degree to be like? Any guesses? So like let's say user 1 has 1,000 followers, user 2 has 200 followers, user 3 has 4 million followers. If you plot a histogram, if you may, how would this look like? Any guesses? Yep, exponential decay, because majority of the people do not have millions of followers. I have 200. So see, it's not a fair world. And so you in like network science terms, it's called like not network science terms, but it's called like the power law distribution. And again, it's don't quote me on that, but it looks like like that majority of the nodes are not that connected, but more like a very tiny minority are connected to everyone. So it would look like a decaying curve, but that's if you plot a histogram. But like Eric Ma, like the co-author of this tutorial, he hates histograms, and I mean I get that. It's very easy to lie with histograms, like just do the right binning and everything is what you want it to be. So he loves this thing called ECDF, like empirical cumulative distribution functions. Has anyone heard about that before? All right, that's fine. I mean, it's all implemented for you. You don't need to worry about the details. If you want to look at the code, you open the nams directory, you go to functions, and there's ECDF right there. And this is how it would look like. For first, just for comparison, let's also plot the histogram. So let's do matplotlib, pyplot, and we can do prt.hist. So what I'm doing here is I'm basically creating a list of all the degrees in the network, and I'm plotting a histogram of it. And as you can see, like depending on how I bin it, I can get interesting results. I mean, like it's fine. You can get something in the sense that you have these 3 random outliers or something, but it's not that informative. It could be more informative if you have something like this. And what the idea behind this curve is that if you look at the x-axis, is a degree centrality, and if you look at the y-axis, it's like the percentile of nodes which have that degree centrality. So if you go so it basically says that if you go up to like 0.09, like 99% of the nodes have less than that, and you have these 3 outliers right there that you can look at this ECDF and be sure that these are outliers and it's not a binning mistake. So that's one way of looking at things, why histograms are not the best thing in the world. Right? You don't need to agree with this, it's just opinion. And yeah, so this is just the thing that like there are multiple possible denominator that we can have in the centrality thing, and it's depending on how you define that. If you want self loops, the denominator is n. If you do not want self loops, it's n-1. And let's plot a circus plot of our people who showed up at this conference. Now maybe, just maybe, we'll find something here, assuming it plots out. Yes. So one thing that I didn't tell you is that the nodes are ordered in the way they came to the conference. In the sense, if someone showed up at 8 a.m., they would have 0. If someone showed up at 8:01, they have 1. It's basically at what time you came to the conference. Yeah, that's your node ID. And you see this kind of cool looking picture, but it's a donut. If this were a randomly distributed network, you would not see that the hole in the middle. So what can we say about that? Can we say anything? And the other thing is that the nodes are distributed in clockwise. So 0 is at 12 o'clock, then 1, node 2, node 3. This is how the nodes are distributed. And edges are basically if there's an edge between 0 and 1, it's these are the edges. And if there's an edge between 0 to 200, it would be like a straight line. Does that make sense?
Are you sure? It looks a little more like it starts at the x-axis.
Yeah.
Oh yes, yeah. It's 0 to 400. Yes, and
Speaking people.
yes, I mean that's one thing that we can deduce, that people who come together, they stick together. That that's just a maybe. That is what we like. That's why we have this donut thing, right? There is not a lot of communication between 8 a.m. people and 12 noon people. So that's something. And arc plot is just the same thing. It's just laid out flat. And let's wait for this. And yeah, it would take some time sometimes, depending on how quick your laptop is. But anyway, till we wait for this, I mean, you wouldn't see anything new because it's just arc plot is a circus plot which lay out flat, and in this case, maybe you get a better overview of that in the sense that things like people who came together, like you have these local clusters, right? Very dark local clusters in the sense that the person who came at first, there aren't a lot of long edges in the sense that there's not a long arc. There are some long arcs, but not a lot of them. So you could say something along the lines that there are these localized communities all around the network. So, and this is why, like, you could have never figured this out if you just plotted a hairball, right? So this is why, effective visualization is nice. We didn't run any analysis till now. We just did let's just draw it out, and and assuming sort it by a certain order, and yes, and if you look at the visual insights, it's just there are local nodes which not interact with each other, and so on. So let's look at this plot. So this plot is the x-axis is the degree centrality, and the y-axis is the neighbor's order, and the difference between them. What could be? Wait, I'm confused. Sorry about this. But let's skip that. There's something wrong with this one. But anyway, so finding the hubs, and in this we just saw degree centrality. There are a bunch of other ones, like the famous ones are betweenness centrality, which is really nice for finding bottlenecks. And degree centrality, you just look at what are my neighbors, right? And something like betweenness centrality, you find bottlenecks, and we'll look at that in the next notebook of how these bottlenecks can make things good or bad. So let's jump to the second notebook. It's called 0 to algorithms and 0 to paths. And how many of you did computer science or maths in undergrad or something, and taken a class on algorithms? All right. So you must remember BFS, breadth first search. And usually we would actually implement this algorithm, but it takes a lot of time if you've not done this, and that's fine. So let's not do that. But if you want to do that, you can do this later on, and you can implement BFS from scratch. But the idea here is that we'll talk about paths. That's another important thing while you're analyzing networks, finding paths. For example, in a street network, if you want to implement something like Google Maps, you need to find the shortest paths. Usually, how do I go from point A to point B, and these are very important questions. So BFS is one of the algorithms of doing this, in the sense that how do I jump from one node to another node, and you keep on jumping, and you look at your neighborhood, and as soon as you reach the target, you have your path. So what I said, if that does not make sense, that's fine. You can read about BFS later on. It's a well-studied topic. So let's quickly look at shortest. Whoops, I think I didn't import these things. Let's run the networks. Let's import things. Yeah. Let's like if you want, you can implement your own BFS, but I don't recommend that in the sense that everything is implemented already in NetworkX. So if you want to find the shortest path, you do nx.shortest path. You pass in a graph, you pass in the start node, and you pass in the end node, and it will give you a path. And depending on what the graph is, in the sense that this, like BFS works perfectly fine if it's just a unweighted network, and if it's just a normal graph, it works perfectly fine. But as soon as you add weights, you add you add directions. As soon as you add weights, you need to use other algorithms. So there's Dijkstra, there's A1, A star. So depending on that, and the shortest path function in NetworkX will take care of the best way of calculating it for you. So if you want to calculate shortest path, just use nx.shortest path, and you'll get this path. So it says that the shortest path from node 7, which is like the attendee number 7 to attendee number 400, is that 7 interacted with 51, 59, 51 interacted with 188, 188 interacted with 230, 233, 35, and 400. So it's a long path, right? So they were pretty far away. And for example, if you did G7 and G10, you would see it's a shorter path. And you're not even jumping that much in time, and everything is because they talk to each other. And let's do a pretty plot. Oops. So if you look at this plot, we are plotting a path, and that's why we have these two parallel things by the diagonal, because a path will always be if we are taking a subgraph of the whole thing. For example, we do a subgraph by g.subgraph and path, and if we just draw this thing, it's a path, right? So it's just a straight path, and that's why if you plot a matrix plot of this, it would just be a straight diagonal plus minus 1, because it's an undirected graph, so it's plus minus 1. You have these two diagonals, and that means that there's a path between let's just say that node 1 and node 2. There's a path from 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 5. So if you have a straight path graph, this is what the matrix plot would look like. And as soon as we take a subgraph, and to take a subgraph, I'm not sure if you need to basically pass in the nodes you want to take in. For example, if we have g.nodes, let's do this. So we have a bunch of nodes, right? If we just want to look at how nodes 100, 101, and 102 were interacting with each other, what we can do is do nx.subgraph. We pass in G, and we pass in a list of nodes. And we have this graph that we have created, which is like a smaller graph of the bigger graph, right? And if we draw this out, let's see how it looks like. So, luckily in our case, all of them are connected to each other. So we get this triangle looking graph. And one thing that you would notice that, once you have this subgraph, even if we name it something, let's say name it Q, and if you try to add something to this, you have your subgraph once, let's add things to it. It will give you, Q. It will give you this error, which is called frozen graph cannot be modified. The rationale behind this error is that once you create a subgraph, it's supposed to be a subset of the bigger graph, right? So if you want to modify this, subset, you should actually modify the bigger graph rather than modifying which is a subset. So that's why it won't let you change things in a subgraph. And yep. So let's. You don't need to do this exercise. So let's if you plot these paths with neighbors, you can get this pretty looking plot. Just wait for it. So basically, it's if you want to plot the path from node 7 to node 400. Like these are the jumps that you need to make if you want to go to node 400. And again, like it's easier to do this in NXWiz than to do it with NX.draw. I mean, it's possible to do it with NX.draw too, but it just looks better to me, just more pretty. And let's quickly talk about bottleneck nodes. And in some cases, you do not want bottleneck nodes, and in some cases, you want bottleneck nodes in the sense that you want to build internet network or local area network which has a bunch of servers, and you only want one way out and one way in out of that, so you can just stop that thing. So you want your local area network to look to look like a certain bottleneck. If I remove this node, I can be safe that this part of the network and the other part of the network do not interact with each other. And in some cases, you do not want that. In the case of airports, you don't want, if one airport has some software trouble, it should not drown the whole system. So to find that, there's something called betweenness centrality, and let's look at that. So if we calculate the betweenness centrality of this graph, so now we have a new answer. According to betweenness centrality, 51 is not the most important node. It's node 100. That's something. I'm not saying this is the right answer, but it depends what you're looking for, right? And to get a bit more intuition about this, let's
Wait, what was it sorted?
oh no, it's not sorted. Oh yeah, it's not sorted. Thanks for the catch. Anyway, we can sort this. Oh. Yeah. I'm not sure if this is the right one.
You get something like, once you're at the series,
Yeah.
you get dot
Yes, true.
forward.
Yeah. I think it will sort you in the. Yeah, it's so if you sort, thanks for the catch. It's not node 51, but node 51 is up there, so that's something. According to this new betweenness centrality, node 188 is the most important node. And again, let's look at why it could be. So let's just compare these two sorting, two different kind of algorithms. And the plot is the betweenness centrality of a node versus degree centrality of a node. And if it were a perfect correlation, you would have seen a diagonal, but we don't really see any correlation here, and that's fine, because what degree centrality calculates is finding the node which is connected to the most number of nodes, and what betweenness centrality does is it finds bottlenecks. I know this may not be clear. Maybe a picture would help you here. So we'll draw something it's called a barbell graph because it looks like a barbell. So which node in this graph would have the highest degree centrality? Let me just put down the labels too, so we have numbers. Which nodes would have the highest degree centrality? 4 and 6, yes, because degree centrality is just looking at the total number of neighbors and which has the highest number of neighbors, and in this case it would be node 4 and node 6, which are right here. But if you just look at this network, which node do you think is the most important node? 5. Yes, I mean, because 5 is kind of a bottleneck, right? Yeah.
Aren't all three of those, the three that are in the line between 5 and 6 neighbors, are they equally important for bottleneck? Like, if any one of those three are removed.
Yeah, yes. I mean, all three are important, but if you look at the actual, we look at the score too, but the most important one would be 5. The reason is that what betweenness centrality is doing underneath is it calculates the shortest path between every pair of node. So like if you want to go from this one cluster to the other cluster, you always have to pass through 456, 456, 456. So all of these three nodes would be important, but because like there's this one path that you can go without, you can't go without five. So five pops up with as the most important node. And you're right, like 4, 5, and 6 are all of them are important. Like if we do, for example, if we do this, and if we calculate between a centrality for this graph, then like node 5 is like 0.55 and node 4 and 6 is 0.53. So it's not like they're not important. It's just like node 5 comes as an important node, which will never show up if you were just doing degree centrality. So that's like the point is that there's no one right measure. It depends what you want to calculate. So you need to make sure you read the documentation, and and like before using a centrality measure, please read the documentation. Like make sure that this is what you want to find out, and if that is what you want to find out, then you can make statements like this is the most important node because we are finding bottlenecks, and we do not want bottlenecks. So like if something happened to node 5 or 4 or 6, that's not good. But 4 and 6 is also they have high degree centrality, so you get that information from them too. But you will never get that information if you were just looking at degree centrality. Does that make sense?
This, the way you said with the centrality, that you look at all the shortest paths.
Yeah.
Count basically. Is that actually how it's done?
Yeah.
That sounds super.
Yeah, it's expensive. It's pretty expensive. Yeah, like if it's a very big graph, it will be slow. Yep, and that was a quick thing about paths. And there are a lot of, as you can see, like there are a bunch of things in there. We can't cover all of them, but please feel free to go through the documentation. And if something does not make sense, please open an issue on GitHub, and we'll try to fix it, and or point you towards the right place. And it's going to be 4 soon, so let's take a break for like 15 minutes, and we can power through in the last session then. All right. And please, if you want to know more, please go through the whole tutorial if you really like that. And if you find any typos, if you find anything wrong in this tutorial, it's on GitHub. Feel free to create an issue there. If you find something wrong with NetworkX itself, feel free to create an issue for that too.
Is the rationale behind the package to be feature complete? As in everything that you can do with a graph, you should be able to do with NetworkX easily by the built-in things, or
Yeah. I mean,
it's not supposed to be like super fast.
it's. I mean, yes. I mean, I think Dan can probably answer that question better. And
Yeah, we'll be flexible.
Yep.
We'll do what you need to do. So make difficult things easy and possible things difficult.
yeah, I mean,
That one's hard to get.
yeah. I mean, there are a lot of other libraries which are much faster, but the problem with that, not the problem, the trade-off you make is that they would have a lot of algorithms implemented, but they would not have the long tail of algorithms that are present in NetworkX. Like in the sense that at least in my opinion, NetworkX wants to be like a reference implementation. It's like a reference book, right? When you look at how it's implemented, you look at the code in NetworkX, and a lot of the faster ones. There's one if you have billion nodes, you want to use a GPU. There's something called cuGraph. It's by the NVIDIA folks, but the problem with that is they don't have a lot of algorithms available. They have a bunch of nice algorithms that a lot of people use, but it won't cover the long tail of all the algorithms that are out there in the wild. So if you have a proper use case, then you could go use them. And I mean, and our plan is to make things faster, but without losing the the readability and the easy bits of Python. So the idea is it's way out in the future, but the idea is that you should be able to dispatch from NetworkX to a cuGraph to a GPU to something written in C. Like right now, it's all pure Python, and that's one of the good things because it's very easy to install. You don't need to compile anything; it's just download it and start running. But hopefully, in the future, you should be able to have like more, faster things.
When I, as a noob, try to find out what let's say I want to do something, but I don't know how to describe it. I know what I want to do, right? Imagine I would want to find the Dijkstra algorithm, but I didn't get to the part where I said, okay, I'm trying to find the shortest path. What is the best way to find the algorithm that's right for me? You know what I mean?
You know, a lot of people,
This is a basic Stack Overflow, where I go and ask my question.
Yeah, and that.
bias. I would say go look for the NetworkX documentation.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
Quick search.
yeah. I mean, like net and.
And then go somewhere else.
Yeah, and like NetworkX is a pretty old project, and it's like fortunately or unfortunately for a lot of things, if you Google like a certain algorithm, our documentation will be the first one that pops up, and that's bad things in certain cases because then we are responsible for it, for all the bad things in the world. But and like if the documentation does not make sense, please do raise an issue. Like, we like that. I like that. I get to close the issue. It's fun to close an issue. All right. So the last 1 hour 15 minutes. Wake up, people. All right. So we're gonna talk about like just one like a quick theory bit. We're gonna talk about structures, and then we're gonna see the beautiful world of Game of Thrones. And let's start. So another very important bit in a graph itself is finding structures in the sense that there is an edge, right? We know how edges are connected. Then like if you go one step higher in the sense that a complex structure, like the easiest complex structure in a network could be a triangle, and triangles are important in the sense that it could so like apparently, like I don't know, maybe it's just like someone told me. I'm not sure if it's true or false, but like if you, for example, if you open LinkedIn, you would usually have this thing that people you may know, like things like that. Like how does that, like how do you come up with that recommendation engine, right? Like a very simple and naive way to do that is find open triangles in the sense that if I am connected to a person A and I'm also connected to a person B, maybe person A and person B should be connected, right? Like if you close the triangle, you have this like it's a very naive, basic recommendation algorithm, but it works a lot. So this is why finding those structures and completing those structures could be a fun thing, and while you're analyzing your data. So in this notebook, we'll use a data set. It's called the physician's network, and what it is it's you basically go to like a bunch of doctors and ask them who is your friend, or like who do you trust for an opinion, for a second advice or something. Who would you point towards? And this is how you find those. This is how you build the network, and how the trust is built. So let's. Any guesses of how what would be the type of the network? I mean, it's not quite clear because it could be a directed graph too, in the sense that if person A trusts B, does that mean person B trusts A? It could be a directed network, but in this case, it's an undirected graph in the sense that it's a mutual relationship of respect. It's not just just A trusts B and B does not trust A. So let's. I mean, we don't need to code here, but let's just think about how would you find triangles? If I just tell you to come up with an algorithm to find triangles in a network, and a triangle is just node A, B, and C. These three are connected to each other. And how would you start finding this? If you want to come up with an algorithm. Let's just start at one node. You want to say that I'm standing at some node. I want to see if there are triangles around me? How would you do that? Sorry.
go to a neighbor,
Yeah.
and then talk to their neighbors, and then
Okay.
talk to your first node.
Yeah, exactly. So like what you could do is that you're standing at one node, right? You could look at all of your neighbors, right? And if you see that if two of your neighbors has one connection, then it's a triangle, right? So this is one way of finding triangles. The other way is like you are standing at a node, you look at your neighbor, and then you look at the neighbors of that node, and then you look at if I am in the neighborhood of that. So you have this triangle. These are strategies of finding triangles, and uh, uh, I'm thinking like, do people want to do this exercise? Do you want to write code? Yes, no, no. Okay, I have one yes. Do I get a second yes? Okay, it's fine. We don't need to write code. It's. I know it's tiring. It's a long day, and so like the exercise was like you have to take test like if there are triangle relationships or not, and the code like the code that you would have end up writing is basically this. This is the code like you basically come up with all the possible pairs. Like if you, like I'm talking about this bit right here just to highlight this. There's an inbuilt function called itertools.combinations, and what it does is that it gives you like for example you put in like a container object or an iterator, and you put in a number, and you want how many how many types you want to take it out of them. So I want to find all the neighbors, and I want to get two out of them at one time, and you basically check that if any of my neighbors, if any combination of my neighbors, if they have a edge together, then I am in a triangular relationship with my neighbor one and my neighbor two, right? So this is what the function is doing. And if you find any triangular relationship, you return true, and if you do not, then you return false. This was the exercise, and you can look at it later. And in this exercise, what we were supposed to do is we basically plot these triangular relationships. And as you can see that what I was doing with these nice explanations is that right now if I'm standing at node 3, and if I look at my neighbors, for node 3, my neighbors are 67, 42, 41, 9, and 11. And all of those neighbors have a connection. They have a connection somehow between them, and we have these 3 triangular relationships. So these are my triangles which are around me, and triadic closure is basically a fancy term of saying that there's an open triangle somewhere. If I close that triangle closure, then I get closure, and they can be friends, or they should know each other probably. And for example, in this case, you can implement if you want, and this is how one of the implementations could look like. You basically try to create like an open triangular set, like to store all the possible triangle nodes that the nodes that could be in the triangle relationship. You go through all the neighbors, and if my neighbors do not have a connection between them, then they should know each other, because that's the thing, right? Like suppose you're at a conference, right? I meet person A, I meet person B. If if I'm talking to person A and if I'm talking to person B, maybe I should introduce them, right? Maybe. So that's like if we live in the metaverse, and maybe that person node A, when it's walking around the meta world, they would have a notification that maybe you should go talk to person B because you just talked to person this, and then you complete the triangle. I'm not sure. I'm not saying that makes any sense. It's just an example. So if we do the same thing and if you plot these things, so we get this thing. These are the open relationships possible. So apparently you see some closed one, but that basically means that there are other neighbors which you should be connected to. So if we complete all of these triangular relationships, we have a more connected network. We have a more everyone is connected to each other. Maybe that's a good thing, maybe that's a bad thing. That's not our concern. But this is one way of implementing a recommendation engine, a very basic recommendation engine which works, which you can explain to people, which is not unexplainable, right? And uh, there's another term called cliques, and just like if you not think about network science or graph theory, what is a clique in the English? No, not in maths. Yeah, so that's what like in a clique, if you have a clique of friends, then these are the people that just hang out together. They don't really interact with each other, things like that. So just like that, in a network, a clique is a set of nodes which are fully connected to each other. And what do I mean by that? So in a triangle, is triangle a clique? Yes, because there are three nodes and all of them are connected to each other. And what would be a simplest clique in a network? Someone said two? Yeah, that's an edge. An edge is a clique because there are two people, or both of them are connected to each other. In a triangle, all three are connected to each other. But like, how should a four clique look like? What do you think? If I draw a four clique, how should it look like? Yes, but just to make sure that everyone is on the same page, sometimes like this is a four clique. Just like if it was just a square, it's not a four clique because in that case the diagonal nodes are not connected to each other. So like by clique, and a clique is a complete graph. That's what it is. So complete graph is a term where every node is connected to each other by an edge, which basically means that you can go from one node to any other node just in one jump. You should not be able to do. You should not be able. You should. You don't need to do multiple jumps. If you do one jump, that should be it. That's the idea behind a clique. That's the same thing. If it were a five clique or a five complete graph, and you would have some sort of this structure inside the network. And what I mean by this needs to be inside a network. For example, it could be a big graph, thousands of nodes, but you have these little structures everywhere around. And if you find these structures, maybe that means something. I'm not sure what, but it means something, right? For example, if you find open cliques in the sense that you find a structure inside a graph which is almost a five clique, which means maybe this edge is not there, which could mean that maybe these two things should be connected. It could mean something. It depends on the network again. So K cliques is basically like three click, four click, five. It just goes on. And NetworkX does have a way of finding all the cliques. So if you want to find cliques, and this will give you a list. It's unordered list of all the cliques in the graph. And in this exercise, what you do is you just find the maximal cliques. And by maximal cliques, if you take these set of five nodes, there is no way of adding another node here. I mean, in the sense that if this node was connected to all the five nodes here, then you can add it here. Then it becomes a sixth clique. But if you add one more node here and it does not stay a clique, then this is a maximal clique. So that's the definition there. And the fun property of clique is that a five clique is a four clique. Four clique is a three clique. Three clique is a two clique, and so on. For example, if you want to look at this, if we next draw complete graph, how many triangles are in there? That's a fun question. I think so, yeah. I don't know the answer. I just asked you. But yeah, so basically the idea that every four clique would have triangles and edges they would obviously have, and in a five clique, you would have, if you take any four nodes here, that would be a four clique, right? So the clique, any k clique decomposes to k minus one pretty easily. That's the idea here. And in this exercise, the idea is, you basically find all these cliques. And if you have these cliques in a graph, that could mean something. I keep on saying these things in vague terms because it really depends on what your network is and what you're trying to find there. So I'm just trying to point you towards things, and like actually making sense is your job. That's not my job. So you can look for these structures. And these structures could mean something, and you can build. I'm pretty sure, I'm not a chemist, but I'm pretty sure that there are some things in chemical networks where they look for cliques a lot. So I don't know why they do it, but they do it. So if you are coming from an adjacent field, and maybe network science can help you there. So let's jump to something called connected components. That's my favorite bit. And now you'll see something in this network. Like, can we make anything out of this network? Any ideas? What can we deduce from this plot? Yep. Yep. Yeah. So it seems like there are three or four distinct communities, not like components. Let's call them components. And it seems like that the top half is not really connected to the other bits. There are like three little things right there. They're not connected to each other, but they are really connected to inbuilt. And if you remember, this is this is like a trust network, friendship/trust network. So it's possible that there's one group of people who do not have a lot of outgoing relationships to other group of people. It's totally fine. And you could you could make that you can see that from here. And again, that's the beauty of good visualization, is that we didn't calculate anything, we just plotted it. And in this case, even like a hairball would make sense, because that hairball would be distinct hairballs. If it were if it were proper separated entities, it would be distinct hairballs. So even hairballs could help here. And NetworkX gives you a function called nx connected components, and it will give you all the connected components in G. And for connected components, they need to be not connected, in the sense that if I am in the first component, doesn't matter how much I run around, from one node to another, I should not be able to reach anyone in the second component. It's not just a local cluster. That concept of finding local clusters is called community detection, which is a totally different field altogether. But in connected components, there's a clear divide. There's no possible way, unless we develop teleportation. By the way, there's another research area about teleportation in networks too, but let's not talk about that. But if you're in your component, there's no possible way of going to any other component. So these are distinct components, and that's the definition. So if you do nx.connected components G, you get this generator object. And as we know, solution to all of the problems of the world is list. So if we list it, you get this big thing, which is basically it gives you a list of sets of nodes, which is basically the first set of node is the first component, the second set of node is the second component, the third set of the node is the third component, and so on. So let's see how many components do we have. So if we find the length of this list, there are 4. So which matches our initial intuition that they were these 4 components. That there's a top half, and there are 3 components right there, and they're not talking to each other. This could even mean that because these physicians are located in different cities, they don't talk. It is a totally valid explanation. I don't know the explanation. It's just what I'm trying to figure out from this plot, right? So you can also visualize this if you want as an arc plot. And let's wait for this. I mean, we basically find those connected components. Because we have found those connected components, we name them 0, we name them 1, we can name them 2 and 3. You can name this anything you want, but this is one way of visualizing those components. So this was about structures, and hopefully in this notebook, we basically learned that paths is one thing, hubs is another, but a group of nodes is also something very important that you should look for. And in this, we looked at cliques and components. The third very important bit is community. We don't cover that in this tutorial. No, we don't. But if you're interested, there are a bunch of implementations in NetworkX. You can go through them. There's a lot of literature out there, and it's a heavily contested thing, at least in academic research. So that's always fun. But if you want to know more, feel free to talk to us later on. So we have 1 hour to go, and let's talk about Game of Thrones. All right, let's do that. So if you want to look at this notebook, it's in the 5th chapter. The chapter is called Case Studies. The first one is Game of Thrones. The second one is airport networks. So depending on if you're an airline nerd, I am, you would really enjoy that. And it has all the codes, JFK, DFW. If you understand that, you're a nerd. Congratulations. And if you want to do that, you can do that later on. But let's first look at Game of Thrones. And how many of you have seen Game of Thrones? All right. How many of you do not care about Game of Thrones? That's a perfect. I don't care about Game of Thrones too. It's just for the tutorial. See, you need to give what people want. So people want Game of Thrones, they get Game of Thrones. All right. So what we are going to do right now? Let's look at this beautiful plot. So for people who have either read the books or seen Game of Thrones, this plot may make some sense. So what it does is it is plotting something. Oh yeah, we're going to say communities here, so that's good. It's plotting communities, and in the sense that every color represents a community, and the font size basically means which character in that community is important. And in this very picture, that importance is calculated by something called page rank. It's also known as a $1 billion algorithm. We'll talk about that later. And this is our final aim. This picture was, I think I made this in Gephi, but this is what we are trying. This is what we are going to try and understand what this network means. What can we deduce from this? And can we predict future? Maybe we can. Maybe we can't. Let's see. So. So let's first talk a bit about data. So this data was basically really nice people out there. They collected this data they just parsed through, and this is not from the TV show. It's from the books. So there could be some differences, but I'm not too sure about that. But so you basically go through a book, parse through a book, and if there are two characters who are in a 15-word radius to each other, they are connected as an edge. That's the data set. We can debate about if it's a good way or a bad way about making a data set, but as we'll see, the insights that we get just by running this using this data set is kind of nice. So maybe this data set collection strategy works. So when we load this data, it's just it's a CSV file. So this we load it in a pandas data frame, and we have this thing called source. We have this thing called target, which is basically 2 nodes, and the nodes itself are the characters. So Adam Marbrand and Jamie Lannister are connected. The third is basically the weight is basically how many interactions they have, in the sense that if 2 characters in a book are interacted, or they are near each other multiple times, that's a count. Their weight increases. That's just a counter. And the book column just represents which book it is. So there are 5 books in this data set. So you go through all the books, and there's something called weight inverse, and which is basically you take a 1 divided by weight. You just take a reciprocal of that, and we'll look at that later why we need that. But let's see. So let's just do some pandas right now, no more NetworkX. For example, if we want to see how, like, Rob Stark, the character, is connected in book 3. So like, that's just pandas stuff, right? And if that looks like foreign language to you, it's perfectly fine. You don't need to care about that right now. So we see that there is, these are the relationships from Rob Stark. It would be either source or a target. That's because this is an undirected network. We need to check for both where it showed up. It showed up in the first place or the second place, and these are the other relationships that the character has. And we are gonna create a bunch of graphs. I mean, you can basically create one big graph, and there's something called multi graphs in NetworkX, which is basically like, you can have multiple edges between two nodes. If you want that, then you can use multi-graph. But in this, what we're going to do is we're going to create 5 graphs where every graph is basically a book. So the character network of book 1 is graph 0 because it's a list, and so on. Once we have the graphs, so for example, the 0th graph in this list is the first book, and if you want to look at the relationships, which are basically edges, right? So if you look at the relationship network of this first book, which is in our first graph, we see that there are a bunch of characters. They have their weight and they have their weight inverse, which we'll use later on. Now comes the $1 million question: who is the most important character? Any guesses before we start for book 1? To win prizes. We're going to use what we have already seen, degree centrality, right? So what does degree centrality say about the most important character in book 1 and in book 5 too? Because like in this case study, we're going to see how things change. Book 1, something happens. Book 2, something happens. Things happen, right? So we would assume that while things are happening, the rankings go up and down because someone who's important in book 1 may not exist in book 2, right? That happens too. So let's look at the degree centrality of, for example, Daenerys Targaryen. Again, people who do not know about this, it's fine. It's just a character. Just say that, and it's supposed to be an important character. And it says 0.112. We do not know what that means, and I'm fine. It's a number, but we need to compare things, right? So let's just go look at the top 5 important characters in the first book according to degree centrality. Again, I'm not claiming this is the right way of finding things. I'm just saying this is one of the ways of finding things. So what do we get? We get these 5 names, and again, people who have seen it, people who have read the books. I mean, it kind of makes sense. It's not outrageous, right? These 5 people pop up as the most important characters. Any complaints till now? Do you think this does not make sense? Eddard Stark is important? Yeah, why not? And in book 1, this is book 1. Nothing has happened yet. Then Robert Baratheon, that makes sense too. Tyrion Lannister, Catelyn Stark, Jon Snow. These are all important-ish characters in book 1. So degree centrality gives us a result, which makes sense. So we could maybe use between degree centrality as a character measuring metric. But let's see about book 5. So things must have changed, right? A lot happened, just like life. So now Jon Snow pops up to the top of the ranking. This is book 5, and again, we don't see Eddard Stark anywhere. I don't know, something happened, and so things are changing, right? So just by analyzing this, you could kind of predict. If you want to get creative with it, you can kind of predict the arc of a character of how they are moving around the storyline, depending on how fancy you want to get. You can do things like that, and this is one of the theories. Now let's just take a quick detour. That the theory is that every real world network in the world follows power law, which means this exponential decay. This is a theory which does not it has its people. There are a lot of people who oppose this theory too. But I mean, this is a real world network, right? What is more real than Game of Thrones? So, and it kind of follows that thing, right? That we saw that most of the people are not that connected, but you have a bunch of people who are connected with a lot of people. So you have this exponentially decay thingy. It's not. I mean, it's not a. It's not a statistical thing. If you do any statistical test on this, it will fail. But that's that's what it kind of looks like. There's a decay here, and if you want to get really fancy, you do a log-log plot. So if it were an actual exponential decay, this would have been a straight line. But you basically take like a log of x-axis and log of y-axis, and it's not. So I mean, but it still follows this downward trend, right? So it's somewhere close to like expectation in the sense that yeah, it's kind of following a power law. It's again, it's not an exact science, and I mean this is supposed to be a exercise, and in this thing we do something called a weighted degree, and we just create our own measure in this, and the way we create this measure is we basically go to a node and look at all the neighbors, and we also take in the weights of all the neighbors. Like we have an edge with a neighbor, right? We sum all of it up, and then we find the centrality measure now. And if we look at this weighted degree centrality that we just came up with, it still says that Eddard-Stark is important. So in the first example, when we calculated degree centrality, we just looked at the structure in the sense that we did not put any weights in there. So it does not matter how many times they interacted. It was just like a weight of 1 is equal to a weight of 50 in that analysis if we just did an unweighted analysis. But as soon as we put in weights, I mean, there is some change because Jon Snow went from rank 5 to rank 3, but it's not that huge of a change, right? So it says something that even when it's weighted, Eddard Stark is the most important character according to degree centrality. Now let's look at between centrality. If you remember, it's it's finding those bottleneck nodes, and even with between centrality, Eddard Stark is important. So I mean, now we can maybe we can say with a bit more confidence that yeah, maybe it's something that Eddard Stark is an important character in the first book, and even with degree centrality, between centrality, you can calculate weighted between centrality, and if you look, we put in weight inverse here, and because we do that because if you remember, between centrality is calculating shortest paths, and if the weight is high, that's a good thing, not a bad thing. But when we are calculating shortest paths, high weight is a bad thing because it won't go through that path. Then it will try to avoid those paths. So what we do is we do this weight inverse, because higher the number of interactions, we say that's more important. So we just do a weight inverse to take this into account. And even with we add weights to between us, still Eddard Stark right at the top. So now we can be extremely sure that yes, we have
Is if you do between the centrality with the weight, will the shortest path also change according to the weight, or is it
yeah
both of these things?
like whatever weight you put in, that weight would be used to calculate the shortest path.
Then you also count the shortest path with the sum of the weights.
Yep. And there's this other thing called page rank, and you don't need to do this numpy thing anymore. We have changed these things. You just do nx.pagerank and you put in these things right there, and oops. And again with PageRank, there's a weighted and there's an unweighted one. But this is why reading documentation is very important, because the way PageRank works is higher the weight, the better. So we don't need this weight inverse now. I know this is pretty confusing, but that's right. Read documentation. And again, we have tried a lot of different ways, and all of these ways test very different things. Like I have not explained what page rank is, but maybe if we have time we'll do that. But all of these three algorithms and their weighted version are telling us the same thing. So now maybe with some confidence we can say that in book one, like these set of characters are pretty important. So who's the true king, who's the true queen? Maybe we'll answer that soon. So, and just to look at a correlation matrix, I mean it doesn't really make sense, but the idea behind this is that do different correlation matrix do different centrality measures correlate, and if there is a high correlation, that means that we can kind of be more confident about our results, in the sense that if there's a high correlation, then for example, if every method is saying the same thing, which is using very different ideas underneath, then we can be more confident. Yes, the ranking that we get, we can come up with our own ranking, like a weighted version of all of these measures to calculate the ranking, but we can look at least the set of characters which keep on popping up in the top 5 or the top 10 to come up with a ranking. So then the next fun part is, how do things evolve? I mean, this can tell you a story without ever reading a book. So if you look at this, I just plot for 3 people. It's the degree centrality of how Eddard Stark, Tyrion Lannister, and Jon Snow goes through book 1 to book 5. And you see that there's a sharp decline after book 1 for Eddard Stark. That means something happened. We don't know what, but something happened. And for Jon Snow, there's a sudden revival from book 4 to book 5 of their importance. Something happened there too. So without ever reading any books, not giving any spoilers, we can still try to figure out what's happening there. And this is just a way of get this bit of ugly looking code. What it does is it goes to every book and finds the first top 5 characters and takes a union of all the set of all those top 5 characters from all the books. So you end up with these set of let's call them core characters, and we'll see that how the measures change for these core characters. So this is the evolution of betweenness centrality, and I mean it would be probably hard to read, but we see this light blue thingy which does something weird right here. So in book 5, Stannis Baratheon, I don't know why, is the most important character according to betweenness centrality. What could that mean? And let's not use Game of Thrones, but there's a character which is not supposed to be important. I mean, it's not supposed to be that important. Is the most important character in one of the books. What could that mean? According to betweenness centrality, there's one character which is kind of, I mean, that character is not important, but you wouldn't expect that character to be the most important character, but they just pop up.
Maybe he's one that talks to 2 important people.
Yep, exactly. So for people who have seen it, in book 5 something happens with Stannis Baratheon, and because that character is talking to 2 different groups of characters which are very important, so that character becomes a bottleneck node. And if you remove that character, then you are breaking apart the network, which is not good. And when I say breaking apart the network, it's not just one node. It's just you are reducing the connectedness of the network. And for betweenness centrality, reducing connectedness of a network is a bad thing. And connectedness is an actual term, and it's what it does is basically if you want to calculate the average shortest path length, in the sense that you take all the pair of nodes in a network and you calculate the shortest path length, and you take an average of that. So that's the average shortest path length. And if this thing increases, that is bad for betweenness centrality, which means that if you remove a character and that increases the shortest path length, average shortest path length, then that is not good. So that character is important in this case. So let's see what's up.
Back up.
Yeah.
If you-
Yep.
Is that's rough star?
Yep.
You know what happens there?
I don't know. Something happens.
You know what?
I mean,
I mean, why do you think that?
I mean, like, he is important-ish, right? Because there are a lot of things that's happening in that's book 4. So a lot of things. Yeah, that's not like synced up. That starts from 0, right? So that's book 4. Thing happened there. One thing happened there, and this is again, this is just my conjecture. What's happening there is that in one of the books, like, this is what Stannis Baratheon is. That Stannis Baratheon is talking to two groups, because like there are two communities out there, and this person is the link between those communities, because this person shows up in a conversation with this group and in a conversation with the other group. That's why we have this surprising result. And as we know that as we saw this before, that node 5 would have very high, like the highest betweenness centrality. All right, so let's quickly talk about community detection. And now wait, I'm seeing that. Yeah, let's print this thing out. So this is like one way of doing this, and you're building a matrix plot, but you basically you make sure the nodes are collected together. The nodes of 1 are together, the nodes of 2 are together, or like the first community, the second community, and this is why you end up with individual blocks. But if you'll see that there are still connections outside of the community. This is a difference between community and components. In components, this would be actual blocks. There is no connection outside their component. But in communities, you try to find clusters, and that could be there are thousands of ways of doing that, and no one agrees on on one best way. Like the one which is most widely used is called Louvain community detection, and that's what is being used here. But people have their problems with that too. So it's you need to do your own research of what would be the best in your case. So we do Louvain, and according to that we get these partitions, and if you look at one of the partitions, if you see there are a lot of Starks in here, so it could mean that all the Starks are together. They make a community, which kind of makes sense. So not too surprising here. And one way of I like to explain communities is that if you find clusters of high density, in the sense that there are a bunch of nodes which are connected a lot to each other, that's one way of explaining what a community is. It does not mean that they're not connected to other parts of the network. It's just there's a high local density of interconnectedness. So for example, if you just plot one of the communities, this is what it looks like. So you can see that nodes are there's a core set of nodes which are connected to a lot of other nodes in the network. And it's the same thing if you if you plot another one. And again, this is not exact science or anything. This is just my way of explaining things. Is that if you calculate the density of one of the partitions and you find the density of the whole graph, the density of that partition is 25 times more than the whole graph. So there's a cluster of nodes which has high density, and the way density is calculated is the total number of possible edges there are versus you basically divided by the edges there are divided by possible number of edges there are. It's possible in a graph, which would be a complete graph. So if you have a complete graph somewhere in your network, that community would have a density of 1, because it's fully connected. So on again, not science, but on average you see that a local cluster of nodes which we found via Louvain community detection is 25 times more denser than the whole graph itself. So again, we won't do exercises here, and like the exercise is like find the most important node in a partition. So if you saw initially we had these bunch of we found these 8 communities, and according to that, in every one of those communities we have different people who are important. So in one of the communities it's Tyrion Lannister, in the other community is Daenerys Targaryen. So all of these, if you have seen Game of Thrones, this analysis would make sense. These are important characters, and they are important characters in their own community too. So are we convinced that network science can solve all problems? See, yes, right. And we are done with this one, and we still have half an hour, so let's do more fun stuff. So another case study. I mean, because I would just talk because it seems like people are tired. So I would just talk for another half an hour. Would you like to see linear algebra, or do you want to see airport networks? Someone needs to say something. Sorry? Airports? All right. See? You snooze, you lose. So we'll talk about airports now. So in this data set, how I collected this one is, I think there's you can go to the Bureau of Transportation Statistics, and they have a nice, you can take out a data set out there, and it has all the flights, all the scheduled flights from 1990 to 2015 in US. And if you I've removed a lot of things from this data set. So the only thing that I've kept is the origin, the destination, and the year, and the airlines that flew that connection. So, and the number of passengers over the year that flew that origin destination pair. So that's our data that we have. And what we'll do is, for example, if we want to find how many people went from New York to Austin in the year 2006, the answer would be 105,000 and a bunch of unique carrier names which we can access, but you can see that. And it's not New York, it's JFK to Austin. So if you put in maybe New York, it's EWR, I guess. You have another 68,000 going from there. If you put LaGuardia, there are a bunch of other people. Not a lot of people were flying in 2006. But we will see certain things that happen here. So what we'll do is we'll create a passenger graph, and NetworkX has these inbuilt functions where you can import a graph from a pandas edge list, or from NumPy arrays. You can do those things, and you basically tell it what is the source. You tell it what is the destination. You also tell it. We use this thing called edge key. It's because we are creating a multi-directed graph. That's called a multi-die graph, because as we discussed in the very first 10 minutes of the tutorial, that airport networks would be directed, because if there's a flight from A to B, that does not mean there's a flight from B to A. It should, but that's no guarantee. And that's why we add this thing called edge key. So every edge key would be basically year 2005, this happened. Year 2006, this is the edge. So different pairs of source and destination, and every edge key gives us the data for every other year. And for example, if you want to access this graph, so passenger graph is our NetworkX graph. We can do you can do JFK, Austin too, but this is also one way of accessing the graph. Is you put in the first node, you put in the second node, and in a multi-directed graph, the third element becomes the edge key, and our edge key is the year. So it's JFK, Austin in 2006. This is the data we have, and this is just the data we have. And for example, if you want to plot how did people fly from JFK to San Francisco over the years from 1990 to 2015. This is the total number of passengers, and you see like like certain things happen. Like in 2001, you see like a sharp drop off, and there are certain patterns that you would see all across the data, and and like even with 2006 2007, there's not a big drop off between New York and San Francisco, but in the bigger data set you would see that there are like pretty big drops. And I mean you can do this between any pairs of cities, right? So and you would always see that there are certain drop offs in 2001 and 2007ish and 2008ish. And if you do it for the for the whole data set, like between all pairs of airports, there's a drop in 2001 and then there's a drop in 2007. And this pretty much follows like I'm not sure if the data for 2022 is also out there. You would have like a big drop off in 2020, right? So uh, you can see this things. So what we do here is that like this was an exercise, finding the most busiest routes, and this is all pandas. We're not doing this in NetworkX. So like apparently the busiest route in 1990 was Los Angeles to Honolulu, and people stopped going to Honolulu for some reason. I don't know what happened. And you can see that people don't want to go from at least from Los Angeles to Honolulu. I mean, you could come up with a lot of reasons. I don't know if it's the right reason, but you can come up with a lot of them. And in 2015, the most busiest route was Los Angeles to San Francisco. So you can get all these nice tidbits of information from this data set. But now let's look at like the network itself. So we create a year network in the sense that we just want to look at the 2015 network, not the whole thing. So we look at the 2015 network it's a directed graph with around 1200 nodes, which are like 1200 airports, like unique airports, and they have 25,000 edges between them. So let's visualize them. And I'm like, we need to clean this data because it's not that easy to get all the GPS coordinates, but I got some of them. And yeah, let's plot this out. And remember, this is only US flights. This is what you get. Like, does this make sense? It looks like US, but why do you have these dots right here? It's all across the world. What could that be? Any guesses? Sorry? Yeah, so I think it's like US territories. So because I think they're counted as domestic flights, so they are in this data. And like if you plot it, like if you want to plot a network, this is how it looks like. So I mean, you can see that this is just Alaska right there, and this is like the domestic network. I mean, you can't make things out of this network, but still it gives you some sort of some sort of information. And the node color is basically the degree centrality. So if you really zoom in and start looking into this, you would get a lot of more information. But let's just take a detour about PageRank that we saw in the last notebook. So like, has anyone seen this image before? All right, so this image is what you get when you Google PageRank. This is on Wikipedia, and so the PageRank is the algorithm which was behind Google. That like PageRank comes from Larry Page. Yeah, Larry Page. His last name is Page, and web page. So it all worked out. That's how PageRank came up, and the idea is to basically rank web pages. That was the idea, right? You want to rank web pages when you search something on Google. So as you can see, like this percentages that you see and how big the balloon is how important that node is. And the idea behind this is the basic intuition behind this is that if an important node point towards you, you are important. It does not matter how many nodes are pointing towards you, in the sense that in degree centrality, when when we talk about decentrality, it's just about the number of neighbors. It does not talk about the quality of neighbors, right? So the idea behind PageRank was that you come up with this algorithm that lets you also taking the quality bit. And so I think in the earliest day of SEO, like search engine optimization hacking, what you would try to do is get a outlink from your from an important page. Like assume python.org, the Python software foundation page links to your blog post. That is much more important while you're indexing the whole web and calculating page rank than a random blog pointing towards your blog post, right? So the idea in SEO hacking was trying to get your links, doesn't matter what kind of link, up in important places. So Google will rank you up and it will show you as the first result or something. So that's why it's called the $1 billion algorithm, because Google made a lot of money out of this. But again, this is not what they use, right? I highly doubt this is what they still use. But this was the initial, this was the paper that ended up becoming Google. So, and this is what we calculate in the Game of Thrones network too, finding page rank of who's the most important. But this makes much more sense in this case study because it's for directed network. And in the case of an undirected network, what PageRank does is it just creates two links. So that's something to think about. But let's just see how I mean I'm not sure. I don't think we looked at this directed graph bit, but let's just create a small directed graph and see how it works. So if you create g.nx.diagraph, it will create an empty object for you. And if you create an edge, 1, 2, so, and this is this we already know, but for example, if we access the edge from 1, 2, it gives us the weight. But if we try to access from 2, 1, it gives us a key error because there's an edge from 1, 2 does not mean that there's an edge back from 2 to 1. So that's always something to keep in mind. And so this is the basic idea behind this. If we calculate page rank for this, we know that if you want to find the important thing here, I mean it's easy. It's 2. Everyone is pointing towards 2. Yeah, you can see the arrows, right? So everything is pointing towards 2. So yeah, 2 is important. Assuming this the web page of network, and if you calculate the page rank, that's true. 0.5 is the measure for 2, and everything else is much different. But what happens when we add an edge? The edge is from 5 to 6. What do you think would happen to the page rank distribution? Does it change? Does it not change? Who is the most important now? Any guesses? Still 2, yeah. I mean, it should not change much for 2 itself. I mean, 6 is a bit more important now because there's something else pointing towards it, but it doesn't change the fact that 2 is the most important bit. But what happens if we add an edge from 2 to 8? So 2 is right here, and we add an outgoing edge to 8. What's the most important one? It's hard to just guess, but it just means that in our case 2 is now 8 is the most important one, but that's just calculation thing, right? So it just happened that 8 is the most important one, but the idea behind this is that because 2 is important, it kind of transfers its importance to node 8 because it's pointing towards it. So that's the basic intuition behind PageRank. And if you want to know more, you can go read the algorithm implemented in NetworkX. So, and this is very important in especially in directed networks. So if you want to find the hubs of an airport network, you need to do this. And one thing is that PageRank is not implemented for multi-graphs. That's why we need to create a year by year graph because it does not exist for a multi-graph. How do you calculate a page rank for that? So if we calculate the PageRank score for, like, JFL or New York, we get some number. But before I run the next cell, what, which airport should be the most important airport in the US domestic network? Guesses. Sorry? Atlanta? Okay. It's the most busiest one, so maybe it's, maybe it's the most important one too, but it's wrong. It's very hard to guess this one.
Some random airport that Atlanta flies to. Actually,
Considering outside
idea.
of the US as well.
No, it's domestic US network. See? Austin? No, it's not. So are we ready for the, like, more like, it's not New York, it's not Los Angeles, it's not San Francisco, it's not Chicago. I mean, they're in the top up there, but it's not them. Let's see. It's A and C. Does anyone know what is A and C? Yes, it's Anchorage, Alaska. Any ideas why does that happen? Yep. So like the thing is that if you want to fly to anywhere in Alaska, you need to go to Anchorage, and all the I mean, again, this is just, this is just what I understand, and a lot of all the important airports will fly to Anchorage. So all the important airports are pointing towards Alaska. And for example, if you see in, like, this is like PageRank, if you see in betweenness centrality, it's still Anchorage, because if you remove Anchorage from the network, you remove all the small little airports in Alaska. So, surprise, surprise, it's Anchorage. And but if you look at, degree centrality, it's Atlanta, because when you're looking at degree centrality, you're just looking at the number of neighbors it has, in the sense the number of places it flies to. So you have, like, the usual people, like, you have Atlanta, you have Chicago, you have Houston. So these are the things that you would expect. But that's why it's important, like, degree centrality makes sense, but depends what you're calculating, right? So that's why there's no, I like to say, there's no right measure. It just depends. So
Are these weighted by the amount of people that fly in?
no, it's not. It's just depends on the structure of the network. That's what we care about, because, like, in a perfect world, you would not really care about passengers and revenue. What you care about is a functional transportation network, right? In a perfect world. But this is what happened. And there's a nice blog post about this. And I mean, it basically argues, why Anchorage is not actually the most important one. If you want to read it, it's a nice thing. But like, what happens if we actually, like, try with weighted? Because it's kind of a biggish network, and we are calculating a lot of shortest path. It may take a bit of time, but let's wait for that.
And this is just 2015.
Yeah, this is just 2015. I mean, things will change, right? So things keep on changing, and we can let that run. But anyway, so the next bit is the other. If you are running an airline, I assume, I hope that you care that how reachable is your network, in the sense that, can I go from one place in, like, in a country to another place? Doesn't matter how many flights, but can I at least go there? What you do not want is, like, connected components here. You don't want a set of airports where you cannot reach at all. That's not good, right? So let's just see if it actually works. So if we find components, we're going to do something called weakly connected components. It's a directed graph thing. We don't need to worry about that. But this is what we are trying to find: is that are all the airports in this network connected to each other? And it turns out, no. There are 3 components. One is the big one, which is basically all the airports. Then there's another component, which is just 2 airports, which means that people just fly from this airport to that airport. That's it. And there's a third component, which is just 1 airport. That means there's a flight in the data set which flies from this airport and it comes back to this airport. That's it. But that doesn't sound nice, right? So let's see what are these airports. So I mean, like I don't know these codes, right? But like if you Google it and if you read about this, it just seems that like the SSP and SPP are like seaplane airports. So even those things are like scheduled flights. So they are in the data set, but it's just like two seaplane airports. So it just flies from one to the other to other. And the third one is AIK, and it just seems that it's something is it's an outlier in the data set, or there's something wrong with it, because even the flight that is in there, it doesn't really make any sense. So I mean, I feel like we can just remove it. So like this is the flight. It's just like AIK to AIK, some right air service, 0 passengers. It just seems an anomaly. So like what? Well, we don't like them. We remove them. Life is fun now. So if we do, is the graph weakly connected now? True. So in the sense that now we have a connected graph, which means that you can go from one place to another, which is a good thing. But let's talk about strongly connected. It says that it's false. Well, that is not good. So the difference between strongly and weakly connected is very important, and we'll see this here. So if you look at this bit of graph, can we go from one node to any other node in this network? If I start from 3, can I go to every other node? Yeah. So in this case, because you can just keep on going like this, you can visit every node in the network, even if you're just following the directed edges, right? So this is called a strongly connected graph in directed graph, in the sense that if you do not ignore the direction, then even if you just follow the directed paths, you can reach every node in this network, which is good. And let's add a new thing here. So we have now something which is pointing from 3 to 4. Now this is not a strongly connected network, because if you end up at 4, there's no way of going back, which is not good. So like imagine in your airport network, there's an airport where you can fly to, but you can't go anywhere from there. So that's not good, right? So what you need is a strongly connected component. You don't need a weakly connected component here. So after removing those 3 airports, we have a weakly connected component, but it's not strongly connected yet. So let's see what is the problem. Like, what are these airports that are not in there? So now we have this thing called BCE, right? Apparently, there's an airport where you can fly to, but then you're just stuck there for some reason. There's no scheduled flight out of this airport, and just like that. And again, this is like a small airport. I don't think it just seems like an anomaly. We can just remove it. It's an anomaly. We don't care about it. So what we will do is we'll just work with the biggest component. That's what we care about. Like that's what we want to find. So we have this strongly connected component. We remove that thing that we do not like, and so now this cleaned up data set is the one that we'll play around with. So now we started with 1,258 airports, and now we have this 1190 airport. We basically removed all the airports which were with BCE. We don't want to worry about that right now. And now this is like a $1 trillion problem. It's about finding the average shortest path length. If you're designing a transportation network, you want this number to be very low, in the sense that in a perfect world, you should be able to go from one place to another place very quickly. If not quickly, but at least not too many changes, right? So this 3.17 number means that on average, to reach from one airport to any other airport in this network, you need to change 3 flights. You need to change 3 flights. I mean, which could be good, which could be bad. But in a perfect world, what you would want to do is bring this number down. Ideally 1, but that's not effective. I mean, that's probably not financially viable, right? But if you can come up with a strategy of how to add flights, assuming you do not care about money. That does not happen, but assuming you do not care about revenue, money, if you were to add flights, like where would you add those flights that this average shortest path length goes down? And I mean that's pretty much the last exercise, right? So and we don't need to write this, but like what are if people can come up with ideas, how can we reduce the average shortest path length here? Any ideas? Where would you add an edge to reduce the shortest path length, average shortest path length?
I look at two that have high between centrality.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't have an edge, then it's there.
Yep.
Basically bring down the average between centrality.
Yeah, that's one way, right? And I mean, like that's like no, and again, this is not. There's no exact algorithm for this, but like adding like the rules like when we do this exercise, usually it's like the rule is you can add no more than 2% of the current edge. Like you can't add more than 500 flights, and you need to bring that number as low as possible. The best I have seen is 2.85, but let's see. But any other ideas how we can bring this down? I mean, we are almost done with the tutorial, so yep, we can do that. Yeah, like because we could do that, but I don't know. Maybe it will work, maybe it won't work. But yeah, that's one way of looking at that thing. But anyway, so like again, the point of this exercise is like to think in network. How to add edges, how to remove them, like how adding an edge or like removing a node can change a network is an important thing. And I hope like you got like a good at least an introduction of where to look at things. So yeah, so if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. If not, I'll be around. So well, thank you. Yeah.